The planet of Valthris was a place etched into the forbidden lexicons of 100 star systems, a world carved by fire, shadowed by titanic peaks, and patrolled by the creatures known only in terrified whispers, the dragons of the Ash Circle. No being that entered their territory had ever emerged again. They were living weapons, born of plasma veins and bone as strong as star iron, bred to dominate. And yet, on a blistering crimson afternoon, beneath molten clouds, a small, silver capsule screamed through the skies and crash-landed into the obsidian plains. It opened with a hiss. Not a warrior. Not a diplomat. A child. No taller than a dragon's claw, with freckled cheeks, scraped knees, and wide eyes reflecting the twin suns overhead. His name was Eli. 10 years old. Human. From Earth. Stranded. His fingers trembled only slightly as he pulled a stuffed animal from his pack, followed by a soft-bound book that had survived the wreckage. His breathing steadied. He looked around at the alien landscape like it was a campsite, not a death sentence. The dragons were watching him. They didn't slither or roar. They didn't need to. Their presence folded the air, bent gravity, pulled silence down like a heavy curtain. 20 of them circled the crater's edge, claws sinking into glass rock, their glowing eyes fixed on the impossible sight. A human child who wasn't running, hiding, or screaming. The boy sat cross-legged in the crater and opened his book. Varanth, the largest and oldest, stepped forward. Scars lined his armored hide, remnants of civilizations now extinct. He could end this with one breath. But the boy met his gaze, calm and still. Once upon a time, Eli began, there was a dragon who had never known friendship. The dragons didn't move. Not out of mercy. Out of confusion. Sound should not have mattered. Words should not have held weight. But the child's voice, high, clear, and steady, cut through centuries of instinct. The story unfolded gently. A dragon, feared by all, who secretly wanted someone to talk to. Not to burn or dominate, but to listen. As Eli spoke, something unprecedented happened. No dragon struck. No wings beat. No talons clenched. They listened. The younger ones shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what they were experiencing. Dragons were taught to dismiss noise unless it warned or commanded. But this story, made no demands, offered no terms. It simply was. After several pages, the boy closed the book. He looked up. Did you like it? Varantha's massive head tilted. No language translated the sensation they felt. It wasn't fear. It wasn't admiration. It wasn't even pity. It was curiosity. Something they had not felt in centuries. Why do you speak lies? Rumbled another, her voice like boulders grinding together. There are no dragons who want peace. It's not a lie, the boy replied. It's a story. Stories aren't about what is. They're about what could be. A low growl rumbled through the group. It wasn't threat, it was agitation. Their world was rigid, forged in the certainty of dominance. There was no room for could be. Eli didn't flinch. He reached for a second book, ignoring the sweat now streaking his brow. You don't have to listen, he said. But I'm reading anyway. Varanth did not interrupt. He could have vaporized the boy and the entire crater in one breath. But something about the calm defiance, the purity of it, held him back. This was not the way humans were described in battle archives. This one showed no tactics, no weapons, no fear. He came with stories. The second tale was different. Darker. A creature who had to choose between revenge and forgiveness. Eli's voice never wavered. He wasn't pleading. He wasn't bargaining. He was sharing. When the second story ended, a dragon at the far edge shifted her massive tail and spoke low. You tell them, even though you are weak? Yes, Eli said simply. Why? Because stories make us brave when we're scared. And sometimes, they make others brave too. No answer came. The dragons stared in silence. Then, a sound none of them had ever heard before echoed softly. A laugh, not cruel, not mocking. A soft, creaking wheeze from an ancient dragon long thought mute. He had not spoken in decades. But now he murmured a single word. More. Eli blinked. You want another? The elder nodded once. So the boy read. And the dragons, deadliest in the known universe, stayed. The second story wove through the night like wind through canyon stone. Eli's voice was steady, his words deliberate. It was a tale of a kingdom at war, where a young knight befriended a beast sent to destroy his people. The dragons remained unmoving, their scaled forms curled like molten statues, listening without fully understanding why they still lingered. The boy didn't speak with command. He didn't posture or perform. He simply told it, as if the words themselves had weight enough to hold them all in place. When the final sentence fell, no one spoke for a long moment. The silence that followed was different from the first, no longer tense, but reflective. The kind of quiet that comes after firelight and memory. Varenth eventually shifted, his voice gravel and heat. Your kind creates false worlds. For what purpose? Eli met his gaze again, unflinching. Because real ones hurt sometimes. And the made-up ones help us understand what's true. Several dragons murmured in their own tongues. Not disagreement. Not mockery. Something more akin to discussion. This was alien to them. In their history, stories were records of conquest. Glory engraved into stone. Each tale sharpened to preserve lineage and fear. But what the boy offered weren't victories. They were moments of kindness, longing, sacrifice, foreign currency in a world built on domination. A younger dragon, blue-scaled and long-necked, hissed low. Why not tell stories of power? Eli looked down at his book. Power doesn't make you good. Sometimes the strongest thing someone can do is care when it hurts. Stories remind us of that. The dragons processed this like machinery fighting sand. The blind elder, silent since his single request, shifted slightly. Your people give such weight to what is not real, he rasped. Eli nodded. Because it helps us see what could be real. That's how we learn. We imagine it first. A pause. Then the blue-scaled dragon stepped forward, reluctantly, and lowered her body into a recline, an unspoken gesture of attention. Others followed, not from command, but instinct. Not respect. Curiosity. The third story unfolded. This one shorter, lighter. A tale of a lonely machine who built stars to make friends. It carried no battle, no death. Just longing and joy. As it ended, a few dragons exchanged glances. Not out of derision, but recognition. The idea of loneliness. Of being misunderstood. It touched something buried. Varenth exhaled, steam rising from his nostrils. You do not fear us. Eli hesitated. I do. But stories make it easier to be brave. That answer struck something deeper than any display of defiance. The boy was not foolish. He was not fearless. He was aware of the danger, yet chose to sit, to speak, to share. And somehow, that honesty hit harder than any warrior ever had. One dragon broke the silence. You are a child. Yet you face death by speaking. That's what humans do, Eli replied. We speak, even when we're small. Varentha's eyes narrowed. What are you doing now? The boy considered. Trying to show you what being human means. A quiet settled in again, heavier than before. Because now, the dragons knew this wasn't a tactic. It wasn't manipulation. It was exposure. The boy had stripped himself of protection, language, power, and shared something unguarded. The elder lifted his snout. Do others of your kind know these stories? Yes, Eli answered. We grow up with them. They shape us. That is dangerous, the elder murmured. To raise young with hope. Maybe, Eli said. But it's how we survive. For dragons bred in brutal cycles, that was almost an accusation. Hope, they had been told, was weakness. Now they saw it function as armor. Not against fire, but against despair. The smallest dragon present whispered something in their native tongue. A question. Translated, it meant, if we remember different stories, Would we be different dragons? No one answered. Because even the eldest didn't know. Eli, sensing the moment, didn't force a new tale. He simply pulled his knees to his chest and looked up at the stars overhead, twin suns fading into distant galaxies. The dragons followed his gaze. They had scorched moons, swallowed cities, shattered fleets. But none of it had ever felt like this quiet. One by one, they lowered themselves to rest. Not sleep. Not vulnerability. Stillness born from something new. Not submission, engagement. The boy closed his book slowly. No one asked for more. But no one left. The dragons stayed long after the stories ended. No command held them. Something older, quieter, did. Eli remained where he was, wrapped in his thin jacket, eyes heavy but alert. Around him, the ring of dragons formed a loose semicircle, not guard, not prison. A listening place. Varantha's voice broke the silence. You are small. You are fragile. Yet you speak as though we should hear. I don't think you have to, Eli said. But you are. The admission landed differently than any attempt at persuasion might have. It was an argument, it was acknowledgement. The dragons, beings who had never known diplomacy as anything but conquest, heard in those words the absence of fear without the presence of arrogance. Niksha, silver-scaled and flame-veined, moved forward. Her breath steamed in the cool air. I once crushed a civilization for less. They begged. You do not. I'm not trying to stop you, Eli said. I just thought maybe you'd want to listen. Why would we? She asked. Because maybe you're tired of only being feared. That made Niksha pause. Her eyes narrowed. She turned and walked back without a word. Eli took out another book. This one wasn't from his pack, it was a notebook. His own words. Drawings. Sketches of imaginary creatures. Not written to impress. Just thoughts. His voice softer now, more personal. A story of a creature who had no home and wandered endlessly, collecting stars to keep from being alone. There were no battles, no victories. Just longing, and a quiet kind of courage. When he finished, no one spoke. Then the blind elder said, That one was true. It was, Eli said. I didn't know anyone else would hear it. You wrote it, Varanth rumbled. But why? Because sometimes it feels less lonely when it's on a page. That truth, raw and unhidden, passed between them like a pulse. No weapon, no power play. Just honesty. Varanth turned to the others. He carries no blade. No threat. And yet he has turned our hunger to stillness. There is danger in that, Niksha replied. Perhaps not danger. Perhaps memory. The dragons were not creatures of comfort. Fire and ruin had been their ways for generations. But now they watched a child not command them, not challenge them, but remind them of something they had no name for. One dragon, far younger, asked, Do humans share stories before battle? Yes, Eli said. Sometimes to remember what we're fighting for. Sometimes to remember who we are. And who are you? He didn't answer right away. Then, we're not always good. But we try to be. That honesty disarmed them more than any false bravado would have. The elder stirred again. We will not feed tonight. A murmur ran through the dragons, not protest, not confusion. Agreement. We will hear more, he added. Not because we are commanded, but because we are curious. Eli nodded slowly. I can share them. I have more. You will stay, Varanth said. For one night, under our flame. Eli understood. It wasn't protection. It wasn't surrender. It was something older, a truce built not on strategy, but on understanding. He opened the notebook again, his pencil tracing a rough sketch of one of the dragons, midwing. He wasn't trying to flatter. He was documenting. Seeing. The young blue dragon leaned in. You draw us? Yeah, Eli said. It helps me remember. No one has ever done that. They fear our names, not our shapes. Maybe it's time someone did both. Eli replied. A silence settled. Not heavy. Reflective. Then, slowly, Nixsha exhaled a controlled stream of fire into the center, low and warm. Not a threat. A gesture. Eli felt the heat but didn't flinch. Thank you? No, she said. You reminded us what it means to be seen. The night deepened. The circle held. No claws unsheathed. No fire raged. In its place, stillness, and something that might have been reverence. Not for the boy himself. For the feeling he brought, of something forgotten. Not submission. Not dominance. Understanding. And for dragons who had known nothing but destruction, that was the rarest story of all. Morning broke without warning. The air shimmered from residual heat, but none of the dragons moved. They didn't sleep the way humans did, but they rested, coiled around questions they hadn't known to ask until a boy had answered them without force. Eli stretched quietly, rubbing sleep from his eyes, unaware that in their silence, they had weighed his presence against all things they had ever known. And still they stayed. A dragon with jagged horns and deep scars finally spoke. His voice cut like stone dragged across metal. You speak of hope, child. But what if it leads nowhere? Eli blinked and said. Then I keep hoping. That is foolish, the dragon replied. Maybe, he said. But it's what we do. The answer wasn't clever. That was why it struck. There was no strategy behind it, no clever turn. Just conviction. Varenth regarded the boy with the scrutiny of someone dissecting a weapon. You are not exceptional. You bleed. You cry. And yet you endure. Sometimes that's all it takes, Eli said. Enduring long enough to make a difference. Another dragon, ash-gray and silent until now, added. Our kind endured by killing. Eli looked up. But what did it leave you with? No dragon responded. Because for once, the answer was neither pride nor silence. It was nothing. No legacy beyond terror. No memory that brought peace. The elder dragon finally stirred again. You offer no terms. You wield no threats. But your stories have done what battles never did. You've unsettled us. I didn't come to unsettle, Eli said. I came to survive. And maybe leave something behind. That last sentence lingered. Not as a plea. As a challenge. Dragons, who had always measured meaning in dominance, now considered the idea of legacy through gentler means. Nixsha stepped forward, slower this time. We do not know peace. What would we even do with it? Learn, Eli said. From each other. Too much blood stands between our kind. Another growled. Eli nodded. Then maybe the stories aren't for now. Maybe they're for what comes after. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a torn, handwritten page. He didn't read it. He handed it to the nearest claw. This one's not finished. It's a story about a dragon who teaches, not destroys. The dragon holding it stared down, unsure what to make of it. Paper, fragile and weightless, had never carried meaning to them. But now it did. You believe we can change? Varenth asked. I believe everyone can, Eli answered. But you have to choose it. No story can do that for you. It was the first time the boy made no offering. No tale. Just the truth. And for dragons, who were born to dominate, that truth felt like a mirror. Because they had always seen change as surrender. But now they saw it as a choice. And choice, for beings once convinced of their inevitability, was power of a different kind. One of the youngest dragons spoke. You came alone. No weapon. No armor. Only words. Eli didn't correct her. He simply nodded. That is the most dangerous thing I have seen, she whispered. They understood now. He hadn't defeated them. He had unarmed them. And they had let him. The elder dragon lowered his massive head. Tell one more. Not to distract. But to remember. Eli closed his eyes for a moment. Then, softly, he told one last story. A quiet tale. A village, once afraid of a forest dragon, learns that feeding her stories instead of fear tames the fire. The dragon, in turn, guards the village from greater threats. In time, she forgets why she ever roared to begin with. As he spoke, the dragons no longer saw the boy. They saw themselves. Not as weapons. As possibilities. When the story ended, no words followed. Just silence thick with meaning. The dragons turned away, one by one. Not out of dismissal, but contemplation. Some took flight. Others lingered. But none looked at him the same. Eli sat still, hands folded in his lap. Not because he feared they might change their minds. Because he hoped they wouldn't. And that hope, placed without demand, was heavier than any threat ever forged. The dragons had left, but not all at once. Some vanished into the clouds, others into the deep mountain passes. None spoke farewell, and none promised return. Yet none destroyed the boy. That was proof enough that something had shifted. Eli remained seated long after their shadows faded. The crater felt colder, but lighter. As if the air itself had let go of something ancient. He flipped through the pages of his notebook. The corners were smudged, the edges curled. These weren't sacred texts. Just thoughts, hopes, sketches scrawled in boredom or longing. But now, they carried weight beyond what he'd ever imagined. Somewhere, dragons carried those images with them. The silence wasn't empty. It held potential. The kind that follows a first step in a direction no one had ever walked before. Without ceremony, a faint shimmer passed overhead. A signal. Human. A recovery drone scouting for survivors. He triggered his beacon. Minutes later, it descended quietly, scanning him. Eli stood up, dusted his clothes, and nodded. He didn't feel like the same boy who had landed. When the ship doors hissed open, he stepped in slowly, notebook clutched in one hand, the stuffed animal in the other. The crew didn't understand why the dragons hadn't killed him. Neither did the scientists, who debriefed him for hours. They searched for tactics, subliminal cues, defense systems he might have unknowingly used. But he gave them no trick. Just stories. They didn't believe him. One analyst said, "You're either lucky or lying." Eli shrugged. Or maybe they just listened. The answer didn't fit into any report. It frustrated officials. His survival was considered a fluke, an anomaly. But none dared return to test it. They had seen the satellite footage. They had watched as the dragons encircled the boy and did nothing. They didn't understand it, so they buried it. He returned to Earth quietly. No medals. No headlines. Just home. A normal bed. Books on a shelf. School resumed, but he wasn't quite the same. Other kids noticed. He was quieter. Not shy, measured. When asked where he'd been, he just said, "Somewhere old." He kept writing. The stories changed. Less fantasy, more memory. Not that anyone recognized them as such. He wrote of fire breathers who listened instead of attacked. Of creatures who questioned their nature. Of fear softened by kindness. The stories didn't seek applause. They simply offered reflection. Years passed. He never forgot their eyes, glowing, ancient, watching not just with instinct, but with caution. Like beings standing on the edge of rediscovery. And he'd been the catalyst. One day, he returned to the crater. Now older, he stood taller, but carried the same notebook, its pages now doubled, spine reinforced, corners frayed from use. He placed it on the stone where his ship had once crashed. No signal. No speech. Just a gesture. Then he left it behind. A year later, reports trickled in. A scout drone passed near Valtherus. Its sensors recorded an unusual heat signature. No attack, no flare. Just a massive pattern burned into the plains, a circle surrounding a smaller dot. The pattern matched something found in the margins of Eli's stories. A drawing he'd made idly. Of himself surrounded by dragons. No nation dared respond. No one was brave enough to translate a message that had no thread attached. Except Eli. He saw the image. Smiled once. And said nothing. The dragons, it seemed, had answered. Not with fire. With memory. Eli wrote again that night. Not to warn, not to prepare, not to defend. Just to remember. Because the greatest shift had already happened, not in the dragons, but in what they now knew they could choose to become. And in the end, that was the point of every story he ever told. Not to change the world. To remind it that change is possible.